Welcome to the deep dive, where your curiosity meets our, well, deep dive into the source materials you share with us.
That's right.
You're looking to get smart, fast, on topics that matter, and you appreciate structure, but also something engaging, right? Maybe some surprising facts without feeling totally overwhelmed.
And this time, you've pointed us towards some really interesting work. It's about how we actually think about knowledge.
Yeah, something called epistemic thinking.
Exactly. You want to understand how we make sense of information,
Hmm.
how we form beliefs, basically, how we come to know things.
And it's not just like an academic exercise, is it?
Not at all. It's actually really practical. It helps us navigate, daily life, engage thoughtfully with everything around us.
Okay. And the research you sent over, it introduces these two frameworks. They come from educational psychology.
That's the field, yes. First, there's AIR. That stands for Aims, Ideals, and Reliable Processes.
AR, got it.
And then, building on AIR, there's Apt-AIR.
Apt-AIR. Apt meaning.
Sort of, yeah. It looks closer at what it means to be really good at knowing. What the researchers call apt epistemic performance.
Sounds a bit technical, maybe.
It can sound that way, but honestly, the core ideas are surprisingly down to earth.
Okay, good. So our mission today is to unpack these for you, show what they're about, and importantly, why they matter in, well, today's world with all its information.
Let's do it.
All right, let's dive in. So first things first, what exactly is epistemic thinking?
Okay, so at its heart, epistemic thinking is really just thinking about knowledge and knowing.
Thinking about knowing.
Yeah, it's our whole internal process for making sense of the world. It covers the explanations we come up with, the mental models we use.
Like for complex stuff?
Right, and also just the beliefs we hold.
Yeah.
The things we think are true or accurate.
Are there other terms for this? I think I saw personal epistemology.
Yeah, you might hear that, or epistemic beliefs.
Yeah.
They're all related to this core idea, how we understand what knowledge is and how we get it.
Okay, so that's the thinking part. What about epistemic education? Is that different?
It is, slightly. Epistemic education is when we make a deliberate effort to help people get better at epistemic thinking, to grow those abilities.
So it's like teaching people how to know better.
Pretty much. And it's not just school classrooms. It could be any kind of teaching, formal or informal, aimed at improving how we learn and understand.
It sounds a bit like critical thinking. We hear that term a lot.
There's definitely overlap, for sure.
But it's not exactly the same thing.
Not quite. Critical thinking often zooms in on evaluating arguments, spotting flaws, that kind of thing, which is important.
Right.
But epistemic education is broader. It includes evaluating information, yes, but also things like, how do we even ask good questions to begin with? That's inquiry.
Ah.
Or how do we build those mental models we talked about? How do we interpret, say, historical events? It puts a really strong emphasis on metacognition.
Metacognition. Thinking about thinking.
Exactly. Thinking about our own thinking, specifically about knowledge, understanding how we know what we know.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the bigger picture of how we deal with information and build our understanding. So let's look at that first framework, AR.
Right, AR.
What are the core components? You said 3.
3 key parts, yeah. And they're interconnected. Think of it like a stool. You need all 3 legs.
Yeah.
Epistemic aims, epistemic ideals, and reliable epistemic processes.
Aims, ideals, processes. Okay, let's take the first leg. Epistemic aims. What's that about?
Aims are basically our goals. What are we trying to achieve when we're building that mental picture of the world?
So like forming a belief about something or understanding a concept.
Exactly. Could be simple, could be complex, like developing a whole scientific theory.
Okay.
And what's interesting here is how much we value these aims. That value, whether it's personal or societal, can really affect the effort we put in.
Can you give an example? How does value change the effort?
Sure. Think about the aim of finding a cure for Alzheimer's.
Okay, hugely valuable.
Right. Massive personal and societal value. So you see enormous effort, research, funding, people dedicating their lives.
Makes sense.
Now, compare that to the aim of, I don't know, memorizing the exact line of succession for some really obscure medieval king.
Right, maybe interesting for a few historians.
Maybe, but it doesn't have that same broad value. So most people aren't going to invest anywhere near the same time or energy. Our goals definitely drive our focus.
Okay, aims are the goals. What about the second leg, epistemic ideals?
Ideals are the standards. They're the criteria we use to judge if we've actually met our aims and how good the knowledge or understanding we've reached really is.
So like quality control checks.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Quality control for knowledge.
What would that look like in practice? Example.
Okay, in science, A huge ideal is empirical adequacy. Does the theory actually fit the evidence we can see and measure?
Right, does it match reality?
Another one might be fruitfulness. Does this idea lead to new questions, new avenues of research?
Interesting. What about outside of science? Like everyday thinking?
We use ideals all the time. Maybe we check if something seems logical, if it makes sense. Does it fit with other things we know are true?
Like when reading the news?
Exactly. Think about the ideals used there. Is it just about getting the story fast? Or do you prioritize accuracy, looking at different perspectives?
That's a good point. Thinking about my own ideals.
It's the first step. Understanding them helps you choose more reliable ones consciously.
Okay, so aims are the goal, ideals are the standards. Which brings us to the third leg, reliable epistemic processes.
Right. Processes are the how. They're the strategies, the methods, the approaches we use individually or together to try and reach our aims, keeping those ideals in mind.
And the key word is reliable.
Absolutely. Reliable means these processes have a good track record. They're likely to lead to success, to meeting those ideals.
Okay, examples of these processes. Individual ones first.
Individually. Maybe critically checking the sources of information in an article before you just accept it.
Like looking up the author or publication.
Yeah, or checking their evidence. Or if you're learning a skill, a reliable process might be getting instruction from an expert practicing deliberately.
Okay. And collective processes, things we do together.
Think about scientific peer review.
Where other scientists check the work.
Exactly. Experts in the field rigorously review new research before it gets published. That's a collective process designed to uphold ideals like accuracy and rigor.
Okay, so aims, ideals, processes. How do they all fit together in the AIR framework? You said they're intertwined.
Deeply. So your aims often shape which ideals you prioritize.
How so?
Well, if your aim is just to get a quick, practical solution to a problem, you might prioritize ideals like simplicity or ease of use over, say, deep theoretical understanding.
Gotcha.
And then, both your aims and the ideals you've prioritized guide which processes you choose. If your aim is scientific accuracy, guided by ideals like empirical evidence.
You'll use processes like experiments, data analysis.
Right. That's a dynamic system. It's like if my aim is building a sturdy bookshelf, use strong joints, level surfaces.
Those are your ideals.
And I'll use reliable carpentry techniques and tools.
Your processes. If one leg is wobbly.
The whole thing might collapse. They constantly influence each other.
And researchers might study one piece, but they know the others are there.
Exactly. They acknowledge the whole system.
Yeah.
And AIR isn't just descriptive. It's also a framework for analysis.
Okay, that makes sense of AIR. Now let's move to Apt-AIR. What is the Apt-AD?
Apt-AIR builds right on top of AIR, but it asks a crucial question, especially for education. What should the goals of epistemic education actually be?
So it's trying to define what good epistemic performance looks like.
Exactly. What does it mean to be competent, to be effective in knowing?
And how does Apt-AIR define that? Where does the apt come from?
It gets inspiration from philosophy, actually, from a philosopher named Ernest Sosa.
So, okay.
Sosa talks about evaluating our attempts to know things based on a few criteria. Did we succeed? Did we get it right?
Okay, success.
Did we use the right skills or methods? That's competence.
Competence.
Right.
And crucially, was our success because of our competence? That's what he calls apt performance.
So success because of competence, not just luck?
Precisely. And he even goes a step further to fully apt performance.
Fully apt.
That's when you not only succeed because of your competence, but you also have a kind of meta-awareness. You understand why your approach was competent and successful.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a high bar.
It is. And there's this term Sosa uses, reliabilist virtue epistemology.
Whoa, okay, break that down.
It sounds complex, but it basically just means judging how well we know something based on whether we used reliable skills and methods, virtues, in a sense to get there. It's not just that you're right, but how you got there.
Being right for the right reasons and knowing why they're the right reasons.
Yeah, them. So Apt-AIR proposes that the ultimate goal of epistemic education should be fostering that fully apt performance in learners.
Okay. And how does it suggest we do that? Does it break down apt performance? It does. It breaks it down into 5 interconnected aspects. 5 ways we need to engage competently with those aims, ideals, and reliable processes we talked about with AIR.
5 aspects. Let's go through them. What's the first one?
First is active cognitive engagement.
Meaning
Meaning we're not just passively soaking up information.
Yeah.
We're actively thinking about, using, and grappling with valuable aims, ideals, and processes. We're mentally switched on.
Makes sense. Can't just read the words. What's number two?
Second is adaptive engagement.
Adaptive, like changing based on the situation.
Exactly. It recognizes that the right aims, ideals, and processes aren't fixed. They change depending on the context, the subject matter, the task.
So what works for science might not work for art history.
Precisely. You need to be able to flexibly adapt your epistemic approach. Being rigid isn't always helpful.
Okay, adaptive engagement. Number three.
Number three brings in that thinking about thinking idea again. Metacognitive understanding and metacognitive regulatory skills.
So understanding and managing your thinking.
Yes. It means understanding what your aims, ideals, and processes actually mean, knowing when to apply them, and having the skill to monitor your own thinking, check if it's working, and adjust if needed.
Being aware of how you know what you know and being able to steer that process.
You nailed it. That feels incredibly important.
Okay, what's the fourth aspect?
The fourth brings in feelings,
Yeah.
caring about and enjoying engagement.
Ah, the motivation piece.
Exactly, the effective side. We're much more likely to put in the effort for apt performance if we actually value the aims, if we appreciate the ideals, if we find the processes meaningful, maybe even enjoyable.
So fostering curiosity, finding genuine interest, that's part of it.
A crucial part, according to Apt-AIR, sparking that intrinsic drive.
Okay, makes total sense. And the fifth and final aspect?
The fifth is engaging in epistemic performance together with others.
The social side of knowing.
Right. Knowledge isn't usually built alone in a vacuum. It's often social. So this aspect stresses being able to collaborate, share ideas effectively, argue constructively, understand how knowledge gets built and checked within communities.
Being a good member of a knowledge community, you could say.
That's a nice way to put it, like being a good epistemic citizen.
Wow. Those five aspects, active, adaptive, metacognitive, caring, and social, poor, they paint a really rich picture of what effective knowing and learning involve.
I do. And it's really important to remember they aren't like separate checklist items.
It overlap.
Totally interconnected. In any real learning situation, you'll likely see several, maybe all of them, interacting.
Okay. Now, the research also talked about why these frameworks were even created. What was the motivation? What problems were they trying to solve?
A big driver was feeling that learners needed better tools to handle complex, real-world issues, the messy problems we actually face.
Things like evaluating online information or understanding conflicting scientific reports.
Exactly. And the researchers felt that the existing models of epistemic thinking at the time didn't quite capture the practical skills needed for those kinds of tasks.
You mentioned other models earlier. What were seen as their shortcomings?
Well, some developmental models describe stages people supposedly went through.
Like stepping stones?
Kind of. But they were sometimes criticized for being too rigid, maybe not reflecting that someone could be sophisticated in one area like science, but less so in another, like history. Thinking isn't always perfectly linear across domains.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the epistemic beliefs frameworks?
Those were valuable for understanding what people believed about knowledge, like, is it certain or changing? Is it handed down by authority or constructed?
Right.
But knowing someone's beliefs didn't always predict how they'd actually perform on a task. Believing knowledge is complex doesn't automatically tell you how to evaluate a biased website, for instance.
So there was a gap between belief and action.
A bit of a gap, yeah. Or at least a need for a framework that focused more directly on the doing of knowing the processes, the strategies, the situated performance.
So AR and Apt-AIR were trying to be more nuanced, more practical, more instructionally useful.
That was definitely the goal. AR aimed for that more detailed look at the specific aims, ideals, and processes people use in action.
And Apt-AIR then took that and asked,
What do learners need to do with those aims, ideals, and processes to become really competent thinkers and knowers? How can we design instruction to help them get there? It acknowledges the complexity, but argues that's just reflecting how complex knowing really is.
it's interesting how much philosophy seems woven into these educational ideas. How big was that influence?
It was significant. Feels like epistemology, the philosophy of knowledge itself, philosophy of science, philosophy of history. They've spent centuries thinking about this stuff.
And the educational researchers saw connections or maybe gaps?
Both. They noticed some inconsistencies between psychological work and these long-standing philosophical perspectives, and they wanted to bridge that.
What specific philosophical ideas did AR bring in?
Well, one was making epistemic aims explicit. Philosophers talked about goals like truth or understanding, but they weren't always front and center in the psych models.
Okay, bringing aims forward.
Another was really emphasizing the criteria, the ideals we use to evaluate knowledge claims. That's huge in philosophy of science, for example.
The standards again.
And the third was the importance of reliable processes methods that tend to get us to the truth. That comes straight from philosophical traditions like reliabilism. AR tried to integrate these core philosophical insights.
And Apt-AIR continued that philosophical connection.
Definitely. By drawing on Sosa's work on apt performance, which itself is a major contribution in epistemology, it helped address how good thinking depends on the task and context.
And the 5 aspects of Apt-AIR, philosophy influenced those too.
Yeah, philosophical work often highlights that knowing involves cognitive aspects, social dimensions, and even our character or dispositions. These broader philosophical views helped shape those 5 interwoven aspects in Apt-AIR. The idea was to build more robust, well-grounded theories for education by learning from philosophy.
It really sounds like building bridges between fields. The material also mentioned connecting different educational psychology theories. Why was that important?
Well, learning is holistic, right? You can't neatly separate thinking from motivation or individual learning from social context. So good educational theories should ideally connect and build on each other, not exist in silos.
So Apt-AIR tried to do that, integrate different areas.
Yes, very intentionally. When developing Apt-AIR, the researchers pulled together insights from cognitive psychology, research on metacognition, motivation research, theories about collaborative learning, and situative theories that emphasize context.
Can you give a concrete example of that integration? You mentioned metacognition earlier.
That's a perfect example. Epistemic thinking and metacognition are clearly related, but the exact relationship wasn't always spelled out.
Right.
Work by researchers like Barzilai and Zohar specifically aimed to bridge this gap. They developed something called the multifaceted framework of epistemic thinking.
No.
This framework mapped out the cognitive parts and the metacognitive parts of epistemic thinking, aligning them with existing models of metacognition.
And that fed into Apt-AIR.
Directly. That framework, alongside AIR, really informed how Apt-AIR conceptualized the cognitive and metacognitive engagement with aims, ideals, and processes, that third aspect we discussed.
So it provided a more integrated way to think about thinking and thinking about thinking in the context of knowledge.
Exactly. And similar connections were made for the other aspects. Incorporating situative theories helped flesh out the need for adaptivity. Research on motivation and emotion informed the caring and enjoying aspect. And work on collaborative learning underpinned the social engagement piece. It was about weaving these threads together.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, trying to create a more complete tapestry. Now, how does all this theory connect to actually designing teaching and learning?
That connection is crucial. Apt-AIR especially wasn't just meant to describe things. It was intended to guide the design of curricula, instruction, learning environments, things that actively support students' epistemic growth.
So, like a blueprint for teachers.
In a way, yes. The framework can help educators figure out what are the really valuable epistemic aims we want students to pursue. What does success actually look like for a particular learning goal? And what kinds of competent performance, engaging with ideals, using reliable processes, do students need to demonstrate?
How might that translate into practice, say, for teaching kids to resist misinformation?
Okay, well, the framework helps articulate the aim, accurately evaluating online sources, the ideals, like checking evidence, considering source credibility, and the reliable processes, like lateral reading, fact-checking. Then, Apt-AIR helps think about designing activities that foster those 5 aspects. Maybe activities where students actively grapple with conflicting sources. Cognitive engagement, maybe comparing how you evaluate a tweet versus a research paper. Adaptivity. Perhaps developing shared classroom criteria for reliable sources. Metacognitive understanding.
I see.
Maybe connecting the task to students' own interests to boost motivation, caring, and maybe having students debate the credibility of sources in groups, social engagement.
So the framework provides hooks for designing specific pedagogical strategies.
Exactly. And often, educators need specific design principles to bridge the gap between the broad theory and the nuts and bolts of lesson planning.
Like rules of thumb for teaching.
Sort of. For example, a principle might be provide opportunities for students to explicitly notice and articulate epistemic ideals, or foster student autonomy to enhance caring and engagement.
And does the experience of designing and teaching then feed back into the theory?
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. When teachers try these things out and see what works, what challenges arise, those insights can refine the frameworks. For example, observing students successfully developing sophisticated criteria for evaluating sources might strengthen the researcher's belief that fostering metacognitive understanding is a realistic and valuable goal. Theory informs practice. Practice informs theory.
That's a really dynamic view. Okay, so we have these frameworks designed with practice in mind. What's the empirical evidence? Does research actually support AIR and Apt-AIR?
Yes, there's a growing body of research using these frameworks. Studies have looked at aims, ideals, and processes across all sorts of learners. Young students, university students, teachers, even academic scholars, and across different kinds of tasks and knowledge domains.
And what are the main takeaways from that research?
One big finding reinforces what we discussed earlier. Context is key. People really do adjust their aims, ideals, and processes depending on the task, the source of information, the subject area. It's not one size fits all.
Can you give an example study?
Sure, one study compared how historians evaluated different kinds of historical documents versus how they might evaluate, say, a scientific report that used different ideals and processes. Another looked at how students evaluated YouTube videos versus traditional web pages again, showing adaptation.
So people are flexible, context-dependent. What else?
Research also confirms the interconnectedness of aims, ideals, and processes. One study looked at how language teachers evaluated student essays. Their aims for the students influenced the ideals they applied, like valuing creativity versus grammatical accuracy and the processes they used to grade.
Okay. And has Apt-AIR been used in research?
Yes, it's been used descriptively to analyze what's happening in classrooms, for example. Researchers might look at student discussions and use Apt-AIR to understand not just if students are engaging epistemically, but how well they're doing it. Are they showing signs of that adaptive, metacognitive, motivated social, and cognitive engagement?
So it helps distinguish between just talking about a topic and really engaging in apt epistemic performance.
Exactly. Making that distinction requires a normative judgment saying what counts as good or apt, and Apt-AIR provides a structured way to think about that. Overall, the evidence suggests people do engage with aims, ideals, and processes, that these vary by context, and that the 5 aspects of Apt-AIR provide a useful lens for understanding the richness and variability of epistemic performance.
It sounds like the frameworks are proving useful for describing and analyzing learning. How has the wider research community responded? Have others picked up and used these ideas?
Definitely. Theory development isn't solitary, it's a conversation. Other researchers have interpreted, adapted, and extended AIR and Apt-AIR, which is exactly what you hope for.
Any key examples of that?
A really significant area has been extending the frameworks to think specifically about teachers and teacher education.
Moving beyond just student learning.
Right. Researchers like Buell and Fies pointed out that teachers engage in epistemic thinking in 2 main ways: for their own professional learning and for teaching meaning, supporting their students' epistemic aims and growth.
That's an important distinction.
And others, like Moragani and Barzilai, applied Apt-AIR to look at teachers' performance in both of these areas, learning for themselves and facilitating learning for others, finding that the 2 are often related.
So a teacher who is a strong epistemic thinker for themselves might be better equipped to help their students.
That's the idea, and research is exploring that. Studies had detailed the diverse aims, ideals, and processes teachers use in both contexts. And importantly, this has led to developing specific approaches to foster teachers' epistemic growth.
Like professional development programs.
Exactly. Some focus on promoting reflection, getting teachers to think critically about their own beliefs, about knowledge, and how that influences their teaching.
Using the frameworks to guide reflection.
Precisely. And Moragani and Barzilai even designed a digital information literacy course for teachers, explicitly using all 5 aspects of Apt-AIR to structure it. Their research on that course provided insights into which aspects teachers found more challenging, suggesting areas needing more support.
It's great to see the theory translating into practical tools for teacher development.
It really shows the frameworks are being actively used and built upon by the community.
Okay, one last major theme from the research: responding to real-world challenges. How did the current information environment, maybe issues like post-truth, influence this work?
That was a huge motivator, especially for Apt-AIR. There's this tension, right? Some aspects of learning are probably quite stable over time, but the world we live in is incredibly dynamic, complex, sometimes chaotic. You hear terms like the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous.
And the post-truth condition, misinformation, disinformation, science denial, that's part of the chaos.
Absolutely. That was a pressing concern driving the development. The goal wasn't just to describe epistemic thinking, but to create a framework flexible enough to help address current and future epistemic challenges.
Which parts of the framework were particularly aimed at that flexibility?
The focus on fully apt performance, which includes that metacognitive awareness, and especially the emphasis on adaptivity, the need to adjust our thinking to navigate this complex shifting landscape.
Has the framework been explicitly used to analyze these post-truth problems?
Yes, a 2020 paper used the basic AIR framework, aims, ideals, processes, to categorize different kinds of breakdowns in reasoning that we see in the post-truth era.
How did they categorize them?
They suggested four main lenses: problems related to not knowing how to know, lacking reliable processes; problems with using fallible ways of knowing, using unreliable processes; issues around not caring about truth or accuracy; problems with aims values; and fundamental disagreements about how we should know things, conflicts over ideals and processes.
That seems like a useful way to diagnose the issues.
And then a follow-up paper in 2021 used the 5 aspects of Apt-AIR to develop concrete design principles for education aimed at tackling these breakdowns.
Design principles again, like what?
For example, one principle was about engaging students in increasingly authentic, complex online environments, not overly sanitized ones, so they learn to navigate the real digital world.
Prepare them for reality.
Another was about helping students develop an understanding of epistemic systems, how reliable information networks like science work, but also how unreliable systems like disinformation campaigns operate.
Understanding the good and the bad systems.
Exactly. The point is, a valuable theory should be well adapted to understanding learning itself, but also flexible enough to help us make sense of and respond to new societal challenges as they arise.
It definitely sounds like AR and Apt-AIR are striving to be that kind of valuable, flexible theory for thinking about knowledge in our times.
That's certainly the aspiration behind them.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, a real deep dive, true to our name.
Glad we could unpack it.
So just to quickly wrap up the key takeaways, we started with AIR aims, ideals, reliable processes as a way to describe the components of epistemic thinking.
A framework for analysis.
Then we moved to Apt-AIR, which builds on AIR to define what good or apt epistemic performance looks like, especially as a goal for education.
Focusing on that fully apt performance driven by competence and awareness.
And Apt-AIR unpacks that through those 5 interconnected aspects of engagement: being actively cognitive,
Adaptive to the context.
metacognitively aware and skilled,
Caring about and motivated by the process.
and engaging socially with others in knowledge building.
Yeah, it's the package.
We also touched on why these were developed to address real educational needs, drawing on philosophy, integrating psychological theories, informing design, building an evidence base, engaging the research community, and tackling contemporary challenges like misinformation.
It's been quite a journey, from basic concepts to real-world application. And it's ongoing work, constantly evolving.
It really underscores the importance of understanding how we know what we know. Okay, before we finish, one last thought for our listeners to mull over. Something to take away.
How about this? Take a moment sometime soon to reflect on your own epistemic habits. When you're trying to learn something new or figure something out, what are your typical aims? What ideals do you use to judge information? What processes do you rely on?
Turning the lens inward.
Yeah. How might becoming more aware of your own ARR profile, so to speak, actually empower you? Could it make you a more effective learner, a more confident decision maker in your own life? Think about a recent situation, maybe trying to understand a health issue or follow a complex news story. Could more conscious attention to your ways of knowing have helped?
That's a fantastic challenge. Really encourages self-reflection on our own thinking processes. And as you said, the research continues, looking into things like intellectual character, the nitty-gritty of social knowledge building, how these skills develop over time.
Lots more to explore.
It's clear that fostering this kind of apt epistemic performance is and will remain absolutely vital in our evolving world. Thank you so much for guiding us through this.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us on the Deep Dive.